So when we look at disorders, we think these aren't very common. They don't happen very often. They don't occur very often. And they're actually more common than most people think. About 22% of adults over the age 18 suffer from a mental disorder. And that's in any given year. And of course, we know that some disorders are pervasive and some disorders can resolve. And so there are different people that have the disorders. But in general, there are about 44 million people in the United States that have a disorder. And there are 4 of the 10 leading causes of disabilities in the United States are actually psychological disorders, and there's 6 that are physical disorders. And so major depression is actually leading the way with psychological disorders due to which it causes or contributes to disabilities. And so it's actually quite common for people to have more than one disorder as well. And so we talk about disorders. Anxiety is a really common one and impacts people quite extensively, or at least it can. Anxiety is really this excessive or unrealistic worry. And it can be very specific or it can be more general. Everyone experiences anxiety. When you're faced with an exam, you experience anxiety, and you should experience anxiety. When people are faced with anxiety-provoking situations, they should appropriately respond with anxiety. That's normal, it's a given, it should happen. And so it actually helps people perform at a higher level, so that you perform better on a test because you're anxious. You perform better in an interview because you're anxious. Those things are good for people. They help people. However, there comes a point when it's not helpful anymore, and that's where the anxiety disorders come in. So if we talk about phobias, there's this irrational fear of something. This something can be an object or a situation. People will avoid this fear or the object. And so, if you see a snake in person, you're fearful of the snake, that's a problem. You're afraid whether it's going to harm you or not. However, a picture of a snake in a book isn't necessarily going to create that same irrational fear. A person with a phobia to snakes would be fearful of the picture in the book just as much as they would be fearful of the snake in front of them. And so that's the difference there. Social phobias, also called social anxiety disorders, are the fear of interacting with others or being in a social situation where they might be evaluated in a negative way. And so they tend to avoid situations where they might be embarrassed or where they might be humiliated. And so that's the social phobia is, I don't want to be embarrassed, therefore I'm going to avoid interacting with other people. And people who have this disorder likely were shy or reserved in their childhood. Specific phobias are really a irrational fear of something in a situation, such as they're fearful of dogs or being in small places like claustrophobia or fear of dental work. There can be a variety of specific phobias, but this really just relates to something in particular the person has a fear of. Agoraphobia sounds like a social phobia, but it's actually more complicated than that. It's a fear of being in a place or situation where the person can't escape from. And so should they need to get out, they can't do so easily and they can't do so quickly. And this causes the fear and anxiety. And so people might be afraid of large crowds because they couldn't get out quickly, but they might be afraid of traveling in cars or traveling in airplanes or crossing bridges, leaving the house, anything like that where people would be fearful that they couldn't get to a safe place quickly. This is agoraphobia. And people with phobias sometimes can really easily live their life they're able to avoid the thing that causes them the phobia pretty easily. However, people with social phobias may avoid specific types of jobs because they don't feel comfortable, and so they create their world in a safe place where they don't have to work face-to-face with other people, those types of things. A severe agoraphobia can really make it difficult for a person to leave their home, and so they're unable to go to work, they're unable to shop, they're unable to engage in social activities, and that definitely can impact their level of functioning, their level of enjoyment in life. Panic disorders is another type of anxiety disorder, and this is where people have a physical reaction to a mental stimulus. And so people have, racing heart, rapid breathing, their sense of kind of being outside their body. They don't hear as well, they don't see as well, they're sweating, they have dry mouth. So this physical reaction to the panic that's in their head. And it feels kind of like a heart attack, but the symptoms are all psychologically induced. They're not actually physically induced. So the person is in no real danger of anything happening to them physically or death. I mean, people don't die from panic attacks. It just feels that way. And usually panic attacks peak and go away about 10 to 15 minutes. Some only last a couple of minutes. There's some that last about 30 minutes, but usually it's about 10 minutes or so. Panic attacks really are unusual in adolescent girls and young adult women. Things like cigarette smoking, where it increases your heart rate, increases your breathing, those types of things can actually be a trigger for a panic attack. And so when a panic attack becomes so frequently that it impacts the person's ability to function on a day-to-day basis, that's when it becomes a disorder. So it has to get to that level of extreme to be able to impact and actually have that diagnosis. Obsessive compulsive disorder really starts with those obsessive thoughts. So people have obsessive thoughts and they try to contain those thoughts with behaviors. And so that's the obsessive is the thoughts, the compulsion is the behaviors, and those are combined together and create a disorder. Like it can be, if someone is afraid that they didn't lock the door, and so they're afraid someone's going to break into their house and they don't feel safe, and they have these obsessive thoughts that are going on, and so they recheck the doors and the windows within their house several times before they can go to sleep. And so it's the obsessive thoughts that are happening that start to worry the person or concern the person, and then their behavior is going to be to recheck and recheck and recheck all the locks to make sure that they're safe, and then they're able to go to sleep after a period of time. And so that's what obsessive compulsive disorder is. General anxiety disorder, this is just that free-floating anxiety. These are people who worry. They worry about money, about children, about their lives, about their dog, about their friends, about anything. They have trouble concentrating. They can have lots of muscle aches and tension. They can have trouble sleeping. They can be irritable. And these are all signs of stress. And stress comes from worrying rather than any external source. So it really is that psychological worrying that creates this stress reaction.